5 years ago, she vanished without a goodbye. Today, at a crowded airport, the billionaire sees her again, holding the hands of two twins with his eyes. But before he can speak, she turns away, hiding a truth that could shatter everything he thought he knew. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The late afternoon sun spilled amber light through the tall glass windows of Terminal 3, casting long shadows across polished marble floors. The airport was alive with a cacophony of rolling suitcases, overlapping flight announcements, and hurried footsteps. Ethan Cross moved through the chaos with practiced precision, his tailored navy suit crisp. At 37, the billionaire hotel magnate carried himself with the ease of a man accustomed to commanding rooms far larger than this. Yet his mind was elsewhere, already drafting responses to board meeting agendas awaiting him back in New York. He had no reason to linger in the terminal. His assistant, Mark, was already arranging the car to take him from the VIP lounge to his private jet hangar. Ethan's stride was purposeful, his gaze cutting through the crowd, until an unexpected motion caught his eye. A flash of auburn hair, a small figure swaying off balance in the crush of passengers. It happened quickly. A woman, juggling a large tote bag, two children's backpacks, and a boarding pass clenched between her fingers, stumbled as one of the twins at her side tugged too hard. Her heel caught on the strap of a rolling suitcase and she pitched forward. Ethan's hand shot out instinctively, steadying her by the elbow. The contact was brief, but it was enough. She looked up and the noise of the airport seemed to fall away. Sofia. Her name slammed into his memory with the weight of years. Sofia Ramirez. The woman who had once moved quietly through the halls of his home, tending to the household with an unobtrusive grace, her voice soft but steady. She had been there in the final months of his late wife's illness, an anchor in a time when Ethan's world had been fracturing. And then, one morning, she had been gone. No note, no call, just gone. His breath caught in his chest, but before he could speak, something else hit him. Two somethings. The children at her sides, a boy and a girl, maybe 5 years old. Their hazel eyes caught the light in a way that twisted something deep inside him. Familiar eyes. His eyes, the boy's dimpled smile, brief and unguarded, was a mirror of the one he saw in old photographs of himself as a child. Sofia quickly averted her gaze, straightening as if bracing for impact. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tighter than he remembered. "We're late for our flight." Ethan's grip loosened, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "Sofia," he said slowly, testing the weight of the name after all these years. Her lips pressed together, and she shifted her weight, subtly placing herself between him and the children. "I can't do this right now." The twins looked between them, sensing something unspoken. The girl tugged on Sofia's coat sleeve. "Mama, we have to go," she whispered, the impatience of a child coloring her tone. Sofia nodded quickly, glancing toward the gate signs. "Gate 14, she murmured to them, then to Ethan, "Please, just let us pass." But Ethan's mind was already unraveling a tangle of questions. Where had she been? Why had she left without a word? And the children, was it possible? No, he told himself, shaking off the thought, yet the similarities were too sharp to ignore. Mark appeared at his side, his phone in hand. "Sir, the lounge is ready." He paused, glancing at Sofia and the twins, reading the tension in Ethan's expression. "Boarding soon," Sofia said quickly, turning to shepherd the twins through the crowd. But as they passed, the boy glanced up at Ethan again, that same curious glint in his hazel eyes. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Mark," he said without looking away, "have their flight delayed." Mark hesitated. "Sir?" "For security reasons," Ethan said, the words deliberate. "Do it quietly." As Mark moved off to make the arrangements, Ethan took a slow breath. He wasn't sure if it was anger, shock, or something else entirely pounding in his chest, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Sofia Ramirez was not disappearing from his life a second time. The departure board above Gate 14 flickered, the scheduled boarding time shifting by 30 minutes. Sofia's shoulders stiffened when the announcement came over the speakers, her eyes darting toward the counter. She knew how airports worked. Delays for weather, delays for technical issues. But this was too precise, too targeted. She turned, and there he was again, closing the distance between them with unhurried steps. Ethan Cross, looking almost exactly as he had 5 years ago, though the faint lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of nights without enough sleep. The last time she had seen him, grief had hollowed him out. Now his gaze carried something sharper, suspicion, layered over something she didn't dare name. "You have no right," Sofia said quietly, as he approached, keeping her voice low so the twins wouldn't catch the edge in it. "I've every right," Ethan replied, his tone even but unyielding. "You left without explanation. You show up 5 years later with children who—" He stopped himself, glancing toward the twins, who were now sitting on their small suitcases, swinging their legs idly. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, but the faint tremor in her hands betrayed her. "Please, Ethan, just let us go." He stepped closer, his presence a wall she couldn't sidestep. "I don't think I can do that." The boy called out, "Mama?" His voice was light, curious. Sofia turned to him immediately, softening. "It's all right, Matea, just a minute." The girl, Camila, tilted her head. "Who's that man?" Sofia hesitated, her back to Ethan. "No one," she said, and the word landed like a stone between them. Ethan swallowed hard. "If I'm no one, why does looking at them feel like looking into a mirror?" Sofia's breath caught. She faced him again, eyes flashing. "Stop." The air between them tightened, filled with unsaid words and the pull of years-long distance. Behind Ethan, the crowd shifted and murmured, oblivious to the quiet standoff unfolding in their midst. Finally, she exhaled. 5 years ago, I did what I thought was best, for everyone. You had just lost your wife. The house was suffocating with grief. I couldn't stay. Don't you think the children?" Ethan said, his voice low. Her gaze flicked to the twins, then back. "No, it doesn't." For a moment, neither spoke. The airports, he moved the space, boarding calls for other gates, rolling luggage, the hiss of espresso machines from the nearby cafe. Ethan studied her face, searching for cracks in her resolve. Sofia stood straighter, but her hands gripped the handle of her bag too tightly. "I'm not letting you leave until we've had that conversation," Ethan said finally. "You owe me the truth." Sofia's eyes hardened, but something flickered beneath the surface. Not fear, exactly, but a resignation that told him she had been expecting this day, dreading it. "Fine," she said softly, "but not here." Ethan nodded once. "There's a lounge upstairs. Private." She hesitated, then turned to the twins. "Change of plans. We're going to sit somewhere quiet for a bit." Mateo frowned. "Will we miss the plane?" "Maybe," she admitted, brushing a hand over his hair. "But it's all right." As they walked toward the escalator, Ethan fell into step beside her. The crowd parted around them, the four of them moving like a small, unlikely unit. To anyone watching, they might have looked like a family, a thought that lodged in Ethan's chest and refused to move. When they reached the lounge doors, Sofia paused. "You get 30 minutes, she said, her voice firm. "After that, we're leaving." Ethan met her eyes, his jaw set. 30 minutes will be enough to start. But in his gut, he knew it would take far longer than that to untangle the truth she had been holding for 5 years. The VIP lounge was quiet compared to the chaos outside, the hum of the espresso machine blending with soft background music. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the runway, where planes taxied in the fading light. Ethan led the way to a corner table away from prying eyes, his long strides deliberate, his mind a storm of questions he couldn't yet voice. Sofia hesitated before sitting, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly on the table as if she were preparing for an interview rather than a conversation. The twins took the seats beside her, Mateo on her left, Camila on her right, both swinging their legs beneath the chairs, their small backpacks resting at their feet. Ethan waved over a server and ordered black coffee for himself. "For you?" he asked, his tone even. Sofia glanced at the twins. "2 hot chocolates and—" she paused. "1 cappuccino." The order was placed and silence stretched between them. Ethan leaned back, studying her. 5 years had altered her. The auburn hair was a little shorter, her face more defined, a quiet maturity in her gaze, but the way she sat, always aware of her surroundings, was exactly the same. He remembered nights in his study when she would pass by with a cup of tea, leaving it on his desk without a word. She had known when to speak, and when silence was the only kindness. "You've changed," he said finally. "As you have been," she replied, her eyes flicking briefly to meet his before dropping to the table. The twins were oblivious to the undercurrent between the adults. Mateo was describing, in great detail, the airplane he had seen outside. "It had 2 engines, Mama, and the wing was this long," stretching his arms wide for emphasis. Camila giggled and added her own observations, and for a moment, Ethan allowed himself to watch them without overthinking. Their voices, their expressions, every instinct told him the truth he hadn't dared put into words. He forced himself back to the conversation. "Where have you been all this time, Sofia?" She gave a small, almost polite smile. "Traveling. Different cities. That's it." His voice was calm, but his eyes searched her face for any crack in the answer. She shrugged lightly. "I had to start over." The coffees arrived, along with the twins' hot chocolates, crowned with whipped cream. Sofia immediately turned her attention to making sure they didn't spill, sliding napkins in front of them, murmuring small reminders about not burning their tongues. She didn't look at Ethan again until both children were sipping happily. "You didn't even say goodbye," he said quietly. Her hand stilled on the cup in front of her. It was better that way. "Who'd?" She took a slow sip of cappuccino, avoiding his gaze. "For everyone." Her answer only deepened the knot in his chest. He remembered those last weeks before she left. The house dim and silent after his wife's passing, the air heavy with absence. He'd spent nights pacing the hallways, stopping only when he saw Sofia in the kitchen, quietly cleaning up dishes that hadn't been used, as though order might bring comfort. She had been a steady presence when everything else, and then she was gone. "Better how?" he pressed. Sofia's eyes flickered with something he couldn't name. "Because it wasn't safe." The words landed like a drop of ink in water, spreading through his thoughts. "Safe from what?" She shook her head. "I can't explain." "You can't, or you won't." Her lips pressed together, and the silence that followed was heavier than any argument could have been. The twins had moved on to talking about their favorite snacks, their voices a light counterpoint to the tension tightening the air. Ethan forced himself to soften his tone. "You know, I would have helped you, no matter what it was." She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You couldn't have." It was the certainty in her voice that struck him most. This wasn't a matter of pride or stubbornness. This was someone who believed there had been no choice. He leaned forward slightly. "Sofia, I don't," she said gently, but firmly. "This isn't a conversation I can have here." "Then tell me where," he said. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the sky was shifting from gold to a deeper blue. "There isn't time." The boarding call for her flight crackled over the lounge speakers. The twins immediately perked up, their small hands reaching for their backpacks. Sofia rose with them, her movements smooth but quick, as though the announcement had released her from invisible restraint. Ethan stood as well, blocking her path before she could take more than 2 steps. "You think this is over because of a boarding call?" Her eyes darted to the twins, then back to him. "I'm thanking you for the coffee, Ethan. That's all I can offer right now." "Is that enough?" "As to be," she said, her voice tightening. The twins tugged at her hands, impatient. Camelia looked up at Ethan, curiosity still plain in her eyes. "Are you coming on our plane?" Sofia crouched down to be eye level with her daughter. "No, sweetheart, he's going somewhere else." Ethan's throat constricted. Somewhere else, as if that's all he was, a passing face in the crowd. "You're running again," he said quietly. "Leaving," she corrected, standing straight. "It's not the same thing." The twins were already halfway to the lounge door, and she moved to follow, but Ethan's voice stopped her. "If those children are mine." She froze but didn't turn around. "They're mine," she said softly. "That's all you need to know." Her answer was carefully constructed, offering nothing, denying nothing, He could feel his control slipping, the urge to demand the truth clawing at him. But he saw the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers flexed against the strap of her bag. She wasn't just being evasive, she was afraid. And that, more than anything, kept him from pushing harder in that moment. They walked in silence toward Gate 14, the noise of the terminal swelling around them again. The twins moved ahead, weaving through the crowd with bursts of energy, but Sofia never let them get more than a few steps away. She kept glancing over her shoulder, scanning faces, her wariness so ingrained it seemed second nature. When they reached the gate, the final boarding call echoed through the concourse. Sofia turned to him one last time. "Goodbye, Ethan." His jaw tightened. This isn't the end. A flicker of something, regret perhaps, passed through her eyes. "For your sake, I hope it is." She guided the twins down the jet bridge without looking back. Ethan stood at the glass, watching, until the last boarding door closed. The plane began to push back from the gate, and still he stayed there, the image of the twins' faces burned into his mind. Mark approached cautiously. "Sir, your car's ready." Ethan didn't move. "Find out everything you can about Sofia Ramirez, where she's been, who she's been with. And," he hesitated, the words heavier than he expected, "get me proof." Mark gave a sharp nod and left to make the calls. Ethan remained by the window as the plane taxied toward the runway. The questions he had carried for 5 years had only multiplied, and one truth had taken root so deep it hurt. Whatever Sofia was protecting, it was big enough that she'd rather vanish again than trust him with it. But he wasn't the same man she had left behind, and he wasn't going to let her disappear into the clouds a second time. The next morning, Ethan sat in his penthouse office, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, untouched coffee cooling on the desk. His mind replayed the airport scene in fragments. The warmth of Sofia's voice when she spoke to the twins, the guarded steel in her eyes when she spoke to him, and the way the children's smiles mirrored his own when they laughed. Mark stepped inside without knocking, closing the door behind him. "I've got something," he said, placing a slim folder on the desk. Ethan flipped it open. There were printouts, a modest one-story house in a worn neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, a few utility bills in Sofia Ramirez's name, a work schedule from a grocery store. "So she's been here for the last 4 years, Mark said. Before that, she moved between 2 smaller towns about an hour away. Multiple jobs, cleaning, retail, a short stint at a diner. No record of a partner, no cohabitation. She's kept her name, avoided anything that leaves a public trail." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And the twins?" Mark shrugged. "School enrollment records list her as the sole guardian, no father named." He set the file down, leaning back in his chair. "Neighbors?" "An airport. Mrs. Lopez, retired. She's lived next door for over 30 years, knows everybody's business." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Arrange a meeting?" 2 hours later, Ethan's sleek black sedan pulled into a narrow street, lined with aging houses and sun-faded fences. Mark stayed with the car as Ethan walked toward a small home with a garden bursting with marigolds and roses. An older woman in a blue cardigan was pruning the plants, her silver hair pulled into a bun. "Mrs. Lopez?" Ethan asked. She straightened, eyeing him with suspicion. "Depends. Who's asking?" "Her name's Ethan Cross. I used to know Sofia Ramirez." Mrs. Lopez's face softened, but her gaze stayed sharp. "You one of those business people?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Something like that." She studied him a moment longer before nodding toward the porch. "Come on, I'll make tea." Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and something baking in the oven. She motioned for him to sit at a small kitchen table. "Sofia's a good girl," Mrs. Lopez began, pouring steaming tea into mismatched mugs. "Works hard, never complained. Those kids of hers, sweet as anything. Mateo's the talker, Camila's the quiet one, but both polite." Ethan nodded. "Has she lived here long?" 4 years. Keeps to herself mostly. But," Mrs. Lopez leaned in slightly, "lately, I've seen people hanging around who don't belong. Big men in dark cars. They don't talk to anyone, but they watch. I don't like it. Ethan's fingers tightened around the mug. Do you know who they are? She shook her head. No, but Sofia's been more on edge. Walks the kids to school every day, picks them up herself. Won't let them out of her sight. She's always been careful, but now it's different. Like she's expecting something. Ethan's pulse quickened. Did she ever say why she left her job before? Mrs. Lopez's eyes studied him, weighing something. No, but I've known fear when I see it, and she was scared when she came here. Still is. They spoke for a few more minutes, but there was nothing more she could give him. Ethan thanked her and left, his mind heavier than before. The image of strangers watching Sofia's home stirred something protective and angry. Across town, Sofia was folding laundry in the small living room while the twins played on the floor. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, warming the worn sofa and the faded rug she'd bought at a thrift store. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, safe for now. Her hands paused over a small t-shirt as a memory surfaced, uninvited. She was back in the Cross Estates' upstairs hallway, carrying fresh linens to the guest wing. The voices had stopped her. Ethan's and Damien's, low but sharp. You think you can cover this up forever? Damien's voice was laced with mocking amusement. Ethan's reply was colder. You've already made a mess I'm cleaning up. If you think dragging me down will fix your debts, you're wrong. Debts don't just go away, Damien said, and the people I owe, they don't care who they take it out on. There had been a long silence, then a chilling statement from Damien. You've got more to lose than you think, brother. She had slipped away before they could see her, but the words had burrowed deep into her thoughts. 2 weeks later, after finding out she was pregnant, she'd packed her things quietly one night and left without saying goodbye. She wasn't going to risk her children being anywhere near that kind of danger. A knock at the door jolted her back to the present. She set down the laundry and moved toward it cautiously. Through the small window, she saw him, Ethan, standing on her porch, his tailored coat stark against the muted colors of the neighborhood. Her breath caught. Sofia opened the door only a fraction. Ethan? His eyes searched hers. You weren't expecting me, she said honestly. He took in the small, tidy front room behind her, the faint sound of the twins laughing in the background. You're hard to find. That's the point. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but firm. We need to talk. She hesitated, then stepped back just enough for him to enter. He walked inside, his gaze sweeping over the modest furniture, the children's drawings pinned neatly to the wall, the faint scent of something sweet in the air. Where are they? He asked. The room. She crossed her arms. Ethan, you can't just show up. Here. I wouldn't have to if you'd told me the truth at the airport. She flinched slightly. I told you what I could. He said, stepping closer. You told me nothing. And meanwhile, I hear from your neighbor that you've got people watching this place. Who are they? Shoulders stiffened. You shouldn't have talked to Mrs. Lopez. I'm glad I did, he said, because now I know you're in trouble. Sofia's gaze darted toward the closed bedroom door, then back to him. It's not trouble you can fix, Ethan. Try me. For a moment, she said nothing, her jaw tight. Then she shook her head. I heard things, years ago. Things between you and Damien. Arguments about money and about danger. I wasn't going to stick around and find out what it meant for me, or for them. Ethan's breath caught. Damien's debts had nothing to do with you. Did you know that at the time? She asked sharply. Could you promise me that nothing from that world would touch us? Because I wasn't willing to gamble with 2 lives I hadn't even met yet. His eyes searched hers, anger and hurt battling in his expression. So you ran. She said simply, and I kept running until I found somewhere they could be safe. Down? He asked. Because it doesn't look safe to me. Sofia glanced toward the window, her fingers curling into her palms. I don't know who those men are, but I know what kind of people can follow you without being seen. And I'm not about to let them see the twins as anything but mine. Ethan's chest tightened. You think they're in danger because of me. The moment you walked into that airport, The past started walking toward us again. They stood there for a long moment, the air thick between them. Somewhere in the back room, the twins burst into laughter over some shared joke, their voices a reminder of the fragile peace Sofia had fought to protect. Ethan took a step back, his voice quieter now. "I'm not leaving this like it is. I don't care how far you've run, I'm not letting you handle this alone." Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "Ethan, if you care about them, really care, you'll stay out of it." He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said he had no intention of doing that. Ethan didn't move from the middle of the small living room. His coat was still on, but there was a strange stillness about him now, the kind of stillness that made Sofia feel as though the walls had shrunk a little, pressing in around them. He studied her face for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was holding back a tide of words. Finally, in a voice that was low but unyielding, he asked, "Sofia, are they mine?" The question landed like a stone between them. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected him to say it, not like that. No lead-up, no careful phrasing, just the raw truth hanging in the air between them. She glanced toward the closed bedroom door as if the twins might somehow have heard. "Safe," she said after a pause, her tone quiet but firm. "And that's all that matters." "That's not an answer," he said. "Great, the only one I'm giving you." Ethan stepped forward, the distance between them shrinking to just a few feet. His eyes searched hers, hazel meeting dark brown, looking for cracks in her resolve. "Do you have any idea what it's like to walk through an airport, see a child look up at you, and realize he has your eyes, your smile?" Her throat tightened. "Do you have any idea what it's like to carry the weight of protecting them every single day, of knowing that the moment you let someone in, you risk losing them?" His voice softened, but only slightly. "If they're mine, Sofia, I deserve to know." Endively. "If they are," she said, her own voice trembling now, "then what? You take them away? Drag them into your world of headlines and business wars and people who would use them to hurt you?" "That's not fair," Ethan said sharply. "It's not. But neither is asking me that question." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. Then, from the hallway, the faint creak of a door opening. Two small faces peeked around the corner. Maid, his hair tousled from play, and Camila, holding the frayed ear of a stuffed rabbit. Their curious eyes darted between their mother and the tall man in the living room. Sofia's posture softened instantly. "Back to your room, babies," she said gently. But Mateo, bold as always, stepped into the room. "Mama, is he your friend?" Sofia's heart twisted. She glanced at Ethan, who was watching them with something unguarded in his expression, a tenderness she hadn't seen in years. "I used to work with your mama," Ethan said, crouching slightly so he was closer to their height. "It's been a long time since we saw each other." Camila's brow furrowed. "You look like Mateo." Sofia's stomach clenched. Ethan's gaze flicked to her for the briefest second before returning to the little girl. "Do I?" he asked softly. Mateo nodded, grinning. "Same eyes. Mama says my eyes are special." "Your heart," Ethan murmured, his voice carrying something that made Sofia's chest ache. She stepped in quickly, her tone warm but firm. "All right, you two, time to wash up for snack." The twins didn't argue, but as they padded back toward their room, Camila looked over her shoulder, still studying Ethan as though trying to solve a puzzle. When they were gone, the silence between Ethan and Sofia returned, heavier than before. Ethan straightened slowly, his expression unreadable now. "You can't keep this locked away." Sofia's arms wrapped around herself. "I can, if it keeps them safe." "We're not living in a fortress, Sofia," he said quietly. "They're in a house with a chain lock and a garden that anyone could walk into. And there are already people watching." Her lips pressed together. "You think I don't know that? You think I sleep at night? Every car that slows on this street, every face I don't recognize, I see it. I count the steps from their bedroom to the back door in case I have to get them out in a hurry." His voice softened again, the edge replaced with something else, almost regret. You shouldn't have to live like that. She looked away. I'm the reason they're alive. That's all that matters. There was a pause, then Ethan took a breath, as if bracing himself. If they are mine, I could help. I could protect them in ways you can't. Her gaze snapped back to his, or put them in more danger than they've ever known. Ethan's next words were quieter, almost to himself. You really believe I'd hurt them? Her voice wavered. I believe you can't always control the people who want to hurt you. They stood there, neither willing to move first, until a small, sudden sound cut through the tension, a muffled sob from the hallway. Sofia turned immediately, and there was Matteo, standing barefoot just beyond the corner, his eyes glossy. Mama, are you mad? Her heart clenched. She knelt down, gathering him close. No, baby, Mama's not mad. Ethan's expression shifted entirely. He stepped forward slowly, crouching down on Matteo's other side. Hey, buddy, I'm sorry if I scared you. Matteo sniffled, glancing between them. You were loud. Ethan's tone softened even more. Sometimes grown-ups forget how loud they sound. I'll be quieter next time. Sofia smoothed her son's hair, her hands trembling slightly. She could feel Ethan's presence beside her, the warmth of him, too close, too familiar. For a strange, fleeting second, it felt like they were both holding the same invisible weight. The fragile calm of a child who had almost been frightened. Camila appeared then, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Mama, can we have our snack now? Sofia forced a small smile. Yes, sweet girl, go wash your hands. The twins padded toward the kitchen, their small voices blending into the background as they debated whether they wanted apples or cookies. Sofia stood, her composure thin as glass. You need to go, Ethan. He rose too, but his gaze didn't leave hers. This isn't over. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the door and opened it. Ethan paused on the threshold. For a moment, it looked like he might say something else, something softer, but in the end, he just gave a single nod and stepped out into the fading light. Sofia closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a long moment, her hands pressed flat against the wood, as though holding back everything that had just threatened to spill into her carefully contained world. Her secret, the one she'd guarded for 5 years, was no longer safe. The paper was thin, cheap, the kind you'd tear from an old notepad, but the words scrawled across it sent a chill straight through Sofia's spine. Leave before they find you. No signature, no explanation, just the sentence, written in a rushed, almost jagged hand. She stood in the doorway of her modest kitchen, the note trembling between her fingers. The twins were in the living room, building a tower of mismatched blocks, their laughter a fragile bubble against the weight settling in her chest. She didn't hear the knock at first. The second one was harder, sharper, snapping her back to the present. When she opened the door, Ethan was standing there, his expression caught between concern and frustration. You didn't answer my calls. I've been busy, she said quickly, but her voice betrayed her. His gaze dropped to her hand. What's that? Sofia hesitated, then handed it over. His jaw tightened as he read, the faint crease between his brows deepening. When did you get this? It was shoved under the door this morning, she said. I thought maybe... Ethan folded the note once, sharply, and slid it into his pocket. Pack a bag for you and the twins. You're coming with me. Her instinct was to protest. Ethan? This isn't a discussion, Sofia. If someone knows where you live, you're exposed. My place is secure. Cameras, gates, guards. You'll be safe there. How long? She glanced toward the living room. Matteo was on his knees, reaching for a block just out of his grasp, and Camila was giggling as she handed it to him. Sofia's throat tightened. The note had been enough to scare her, but Ethan's certainty, the way he said, as long as it takes, made her realize this wasn't going to disappear overnight. She exhaled slowly. Just a few days. That's all I'm asking, he said. Within an hour, she was zipping up a worn duffel bag, tucking the twins' favorite pajamas on top so they'd have something familiar. Ethan waited outside with the car, the black SUV idling at the curb like a silent sentinel. The drive to his mansion was quiet at first. The twins sat in the back, wide-eyed at the city lights flickering past. Sofia stared out the window, her reflection ghost against the dark glass, trying not to think about the last time she'd been anywhere near that house. When the gates came into view, a wave of memory crashed over her. She had walked through those gates hundreds of times before, always with a maid's uniform neatly pressed, her head slightly bowed out of habit. She could still remember the scent of the rose garden in spring, the faint sound of piano music drifting from an upstairs room where Ethan's late wife used to practice. As the car rolled to a stop, she caught herself holding her breath. Ethan got out first, opening the rear door for the twins. Mateo hesitated, taking his sister's hand before stepping out. "Mama, is this a hotel?" "No, Karina," she said softly. "It's a house." "Castle," Camila corrected, her eyes scanning the sweeping stone facade, the tall windows, the ivy curling up the walls. Ethan's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Come on, I'll show you inside." The foyer was just as she remembered. Marble floors polished to a mirror sheen, the grand staircase curling upward like something out of a storybook. The chandelier above caught the light in 1,000 glittering shards. The twins froze just inside the door, their gazes darting everywhere at once. Mateo reached for the carved banister but glanced at Sofia first, as if asking permission. She nodded, and his small fingers brushed the wood. "You can explore in the morning," Ethan said gently. "It's been a long day." One of the staff, a woman Sofia didn't recognize, appeared to take their bags upstairs. Sofia stiffened instinctively, her old habits flaring, but Ethan touched her arm lightly. "They're here to help you now. Let them." It was a strange reversal, walking through these halls not as a maid, but as a guest. Each step seemed to echo with ghosts of the past. She could almost see herself in the kitchen, laughing softly as she prepared tea for Ethan's late wife, Isabella, who had a way of making even the staff feel like family. She remembered evenings when Ethan would wander in, tie loosened, leaning against the counter while Sofia chopped vegetables, their conversations circling from the weather, to books, to the quiet loneliness neither of them dared name. Now, those memories sat between them like something fragile. He led her and the twins to a suite of rooms at the far end of the second floor. The sitting room was warm, a fire crackling in the hearth, and the adjoining bedrooms each had beds big enough for the twins to get lost in. "We'll be right across the hall from you," Ethan said, "and there's a lock on your door, just in case. That makes you feel better?" Sofia nodded, though she doubted any lock could ease the tightness in her chest. The twins explored their room for a few minutes, Camila bouncing experimentally on the mattress, while Mateo discovered the bookshelf stocked with colorful storybooks. Sofia watched them, torn between relief that they seemed at ease and an unease she couldn't quite name. When Ethan excused himself to take a call, she wandered to the window. The gardens below were bathed in soft light, the hedges still perfectly trimmed, the stone fountain in the center casting ripples into its pool. Somewhere beyond those gardens was the small bench where she used to sit during her short breaks, sipping tea while the night air cooled her skin. She could almost hear Isabella's voice, gentle and warm, calling her back inside. "Mama," Camila said, tugging at her sleeve, "can we sleep with the door open?" She crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Of course, mi amor." Mateo came over, holding a book in his hands. "Can Ethan read to us?" The question caught her off guard. "Maybe tomorrow," she said softly, glancing toward the door where his footsteps had just faded. Out that night, long after the twins had fallen asleep, Sofia lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the mansion around her. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed. The sound of it, familiar and strange all at once, reminded her of how easily the past could find its way back, no matter how far she'd tried to run. The next morning, Ethan's world shifted, not with a loud revelation, but with a manila envelope laid quietly on his desk. His lawyer, Daniel Whitmore, had delivered it in person, his expression tight. "I ran the search you asked for," Daniel said, lowering his voice. "I pulled the twins' birth certificates from the municipal archive. You'll want to see this yourself." Ethan's pulse quickened as he opened the envelope. 2 certified copies, each with neatly printed names, Mateo Ramirez and Camila Ramirez. Date of birth, the same day. Mother, Sofia Ramirez. Father's name, blank. The air in the study seemed to thin. His thumb traced the empty space where his name could have been, should have been. The thought of it, the deliberate omission, stung like a blade. Daniel was still speaking. Legally, it means nothing without acknowledgement or a paternity test, but he hesitated. It's unusual, Ethan, and you said you saw yourself in them? He nodded slowly, unable to tear his gaze away from those empty lines. I don't just see myself, I feel them. Daniel pressed his lips together, reading the weight in Ethan's tone. If you want to move forward, do it carefully, for their sake and hers. After Daniel left, Ethan sat for several minutes without moving, the papers still in his hand. The emptiness on them felt like a lie carved in plain sight. He had to know why. Sofia was in the garden when he found her, kneeling beside a bed of white roses. The twins were chasing each other across the grass, their laughter rising like sunlight. Sofia, he said, his voice low but firm. She glanced up, her hand still in the soil. Is something wrong? He stepped closer, holding out the papers. You tell me. Her brow furrowed as she took them. The color drained from her face the moment she realized what they were. Where did you get these? Lori pulled it in, he said. You left the father's name blank. You didn't even put... He stopped, his voice fraying. Why? She set the papers down on the edge of the garden bed, wiping her hands on her jeans, though the tremor in them was impossible to hide. Because I had to. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give without putting them in danger. The word danger landed between them like a stone. He took a step closer, searching her face. What kind of danger, Sofia? What have you been protecting them from? From me. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp with hurt. No, never from you. Then from who? For a long moment, she said nothing. The twins' laughter drifted back to them on the breeze, too bright for the heaviness in her chest. She looked down at her hands, soil still caught under her nails, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Damien's people. Ethan froze. What do you mean, Damien's people? Sofia's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. The night I left, I overheard a call. Damien was shouting at someone, talking about debt, about using whatever leverage necessary to push you out of something. And then he said, even the people under your roof aren't untouchable. Her hands tightened in her lap. I was pregnant, Ethan. I knew what it would mean if they realized, if anyone realized. You were already a target. I couldn't let them use the children to hurt you. He stared at her, a dozen emotions colliding. Disbelief, fury, grief, but all of them drowned under a rising tide of something heavier. So you disappeared. Without a word. Without letting me. You thought it was the only way to keep you all safe. She cut in, her voice breaking. I took jobs no one wanted. I moved apartments every year. I taught the twins never to talk to strangers. All because I knew if your brother's associates got even a hint. She shook her head. It wasn't just my life on the line. Ethan's jaw worked, but he didn't trust himself to speak yet. The memories were flooding back. The months after she left, the way the house felt colder, the unanswered questions that gnawed at him. And now, to hear that she had been living in fear, alone, for half a decade, it was almost too much to take in. There was a rustle of paper, and Sofia reached into the pocket of her cardigan. There's something I've kept all these years. I never knew if I should give it to you, but... She held out an envelope, the edges worn soft from being handled so many times. Est. His name was written on the front in a familiar hand, graceful, deliberate. Isabella's. He looked at Sofia. Where did you get this? She gave it to me a week before she died. She said it was for you, but only if I ever saw you losing yourself to the world you were in. With slow, careful fingers, he opened the envelope. The scent of old paper and faint lavender rose up, and then, her voice, not in sound, but in the curve of her words, filled the air. So if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to remind you who you are. This world will take from you, piece by piece, until you don't recognize yourself. When that happens, look to the ones who kept you human. For me, that was Sofia. She gave me comfort in my last days, and she gave you something even greater, a reminder of gentleness when the world turned cruel. Protect her, even if you don't understand why. His eyes blurred before he reached the end. When he looked at Sofia again, she was watching him with a stillness that seemed to hold the last 5 years in it. "I didn't betray you, Ethan," she said quietly. "I just chose the kind of life where the twins could laugh in the sun without looking over their shoulders, even if it meant you thought I'd turn my back on you." Something inside him shifted then. The anger that had driven him to dig through her past, to confront her with empty lines on a birth certificate, cracked under the weight of what she had carried alone. He stepped forward, his voice low. "I see that now." Her breath hitched. "You should never have had to do it alone," he said. "I can't change the years we lost, but I can promise you this. No one will touch them. Or you. Not while I'm breathing." For the first time in years, her shoulders eased. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the start of something that had been denied to both of them for too long. And as the twins' voices called out from the garden, Ethan realized that protecting them wasn't just an obligation. It was the only thing that mattered. The first crack of thunder rolled in like a warning, low and heavy, rattling the glass of the wide balcony doors. The rain that followed came hard and fast, pounding against the mansion's windows in relentless sheets. Somewhere upstairs, a window slammed shut with a sharp bang, followed by the muted sound of the twins' laughter. Safe in their beds, unaware of the storm's intensity. Upstairs, the grand living room was dim. The storm had taken out the power minutes ago, and the generator hadn't yet kicked in. Only the flickering glow of a few candles lit the room, their flames bending and stretching in the occasional draft. The warm light softened Ethan's sharp features, making him look less like the untouchable hotel magnate the world knew, and more like the man Sofia had once known. Quiet, burdened, and human. She sat at the far end of the couch, knees drawn up slightly, her hands curled around a mug of untouched tea. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm inside her. Loud, chaotic, impossible to ignore. Every time lightning lit the room, she caught glimpses of Ethan's eyes on her, steady and searching. "You're quiet," he finally said, his voice low, barely rising over the patter of rain. Sofia let out a small, humorless laugh. "What is there to say?" "To a lie," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Things you've been holding in for years. Things I should have asked you the moment you walked out of my life." The wind howled, and another bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating the raw tension between them. She glanced away, focusing on a shadow of a candle on the wall. "Some truths don't make anything better. They just hurt." "I handle hurt," he said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What I can't handle is not knowing." His voice was steady, but there was something under it, a plea, a desperation that pulled at her resolve. She set the mug down, her fingers trembling slightly. "You think you want to know, Ethan, but once it's said, we can't take it back." "We've been living with ghosts for too long, Sofia," he said. "Ghosts of what-ifs. Ghosts of you." Her breath caught, a mix of surprise and the ache of recognition. She swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the table between them. "You weren't supposed to be one of my ghosts," she said softly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, broken only by the sound of rain and the occasional low rumble of thunder. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "Why did you leave without a word? No note, no explanation, nothing. You just disappeared." And the impression. Sofia's lips parted, but no words came out. Her mind flashed back to that night, Damien's voice, the threats, the knowledge that the safest choice was the hardest one. "Because if I stayed," she said finally, "you might not have had a future at all." He blinked, confusion cutting through the intensity in his expression. "What does that mean?" "It means that loving you—" She stopped herself, the words hovering like fragile glass about to shatter. She shook her head. "It means staying would have put you in danger, and Ethan leaned back, his jaw tightening. "You loved me." His voice was softer now, like he wasn't sure if he wanted her to confirm it or take it back. Sofia stared at him, the candlelight catching in her eyes. I did, she admitted, each word deliberate. Before everything. Before your wife got sick. Before I told myself it was wrong. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the weight of her confession pressed against something deep inside him. You think I didn't notice? He murmured. Her brows drew together. You noticed? It noticed everything, Ethan said. The way you'd stay up with me in the kitchen when I couldn't sleep. The way you took care of her, not because it was your job, but because you cared. And the way it nearly killed you to watch her fade. The storm roared outside, but inside the air was still, every word heavy with the years they'd lost. I buried it, Ethan continued. Every feeling. I told myself it was loyalty, that I couldn't think about you that way. And when she passed, I convinced myself it was too late. That you were gone for good. Sofia's chest tightened. It wasn't too late, she whispered. Then why run? His voice cracked on the question, just enough to betray how much the answer mattered. She looked down at her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Because I was carrying your children, she said, the truth finally spilling into the candlelit room. And because your brother was watching. Ethan sat very still, the flicker of the candlelight catching the sharp lines of his face, his jaw flexed, his breath deepening. They're mine, he said, not a question, but a realization spoken aloud. And to sleep again. Sofia said quietly. They always were. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, leaning back, he ran a hand over his face, as though trying to wipe away the years of not knowing. You should have told me. I had awareness that if I had, Damien would have found a way to use them against you. He had debts, dangerous ones. I heard him talking one night, about leverage, about family weaknesses. I couldn't let them become part of that game. Her voice shook, but her eyes stayed steady on his. I thought I was protecting them. And maybe protecting you too. Ethan looked at her, the anger that had been simmering for days, now replaced by something more complicated. Something closer to grief. All these years, he said softly, I could have been there. All these years, she replied, I kept them safe. Another crack of thunder shook the house, but neither of them flinched. Instead, Ethan reached across the space between them, his hand resting on hers. She didn't pull away. More running, he said, his voice steady. No more secrets. Sofia's throat tightened. I don't know if I remember how to stay, she admitted. Then, I'll remind you, Ethan said. His hand tightened just slightly over hers, as if anchoring her in place. For the first time that night, she smiled. Small, tentative, but real. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, the storm was beginning to break. The candles flickered again as a gust of wind slipped through the small gap in the balcony doors. Sofia shivered, more from the weight of the conversation than from the cool draft. Ethan noticed and stood, crossing the room to latch the doors more firmly. When he returned, he didn't sit on the opposite side of the couch. Instead, he sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his arm. The nearness unsettled her. For years, her memories of him had been sharp but distant, like pictures she kept locked in a drawer. Now, with him beside her, those memories weren't just images. They were alive, breathing, reaching for her. I used to imagine this, Ethan said quietly. You here, the twins asleep upstairs. Us, talking like this. No lies, no half-truths. She gave a small, shaky laugh. I used to imagine it too, and then I'd remind myself that it was impossible. Ethan turned his head, his gaze steady on her. It's not impossible anymore. Her instinct was to argue, to list the reasons why this couldn't work, why it was dangerous, but the fight in her was tired. She had carried her reasons like armor for so long, and tonight they felt heavy enough to crush her. I don't know how to trust this, she said. Everything we had was built in the shadows, and the last time I trusted what I felt, she trailed off, not needing to finish. The way she left had been answer enough. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped. Then let's build something new, he said. No shadows this time, no one between us, not even the past. Sofia studied him, the lines at the corners of his eyes, The way his voice softened when he wasn't speaking, as the billionaire everyone knew, but as the man she had once stayed up with at 2 a.m, sharing quiet cups of coffee in the kitchen. "Do you forgive me?" she asked suddenly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Leaving?" His brow furrowed. "I'm still angry, Sofia. I won't lie. But I understand now, and maybe understanding is more important than forgiveness." She nodded slowly. It was more than she expected. Another low rumble of thunder rolled overhead, and Ethan reached for the candle on the table, adjusting it so the flame cast a steadier glow. In that light, she could see something unguarded in his eyes, something that made her chest ache. "There's one more thing I never said," she murmured. He waited. "Your wife was sick. I promised her something." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "What promise?" Sofia's throat tightened. "She knew how I felt about you. She didn't blame me for it. She asked me to make sure you didn't lose yourself when she was gone, that you didn't turn into a man who built walls so high no one could reach you." He exhaled slowly, his shoulders sinking, as if the weight of her words pressed into him. "She knew me too well. She also told me to leave if staying ever meant putting you in danger," Sofia said. "She was the one who gave me the strength to go when I did." Ethan was quiet for a long time, processing. "I wish she could see us now," he said finally. "I think she'd want us to be happy?" Sofia's lips curved in a faint, sad smile. They fell into silence again, but it wasn't the same tense quiet from before. This was a softer stillness, like a pause between heartbeats. Ethan leaned back, his hand resting on the couch between them, close enough that her fingers could brush his if she moved them just slightly. "Sofia," he said, his voice low, almost careful. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." Her pulse quickened. "All right? Fight for you, for the twins. Will you stay? Not just for tonight, not just until the danger passes. Will you stay because you want to?" The question landed in her chest like a stone in water, rippling through every guarded part of her. She could still hear the rain on the windows, the storm outside, refusing to relent, as if the world was holding its breath for her answer. She turned her head to meet his eyes. "If you fight for us, I won't run again." Something shifted in his expression. A relief, a quiet relief, as though he'd been bracing for disappointment, and instead found something solid to hold on to. "To more running," he repeated. "More secrets," she added. Lightning flashed again, briefly painting his face in stark white before the shadows closed in once more. In that moment, she realized how much of her life had been spent avoiding the truth, and how much of it had been waiting for this chance to stop hiding. Ethan's hand moved from the couch to hers, his fingers curling around her own with a gentle firmness. "Then, we start now." Her throat was too tight to speak, so she simply nodded, letting the warmth of his hand anchor her. A soft sound came from upstairs, a sleepy murmur from one of the twins. Sofia instinctively started to rise, but Ethan stopped her with a touch. "I'll check on them," he said. "Stay here." She watched him disappear into the dim hallway, his tall frame lit briefly by the candlelight before fading into shadow. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs was steady, unhurried, as if the conversation they'd just had settled something deep inside him. When he returned a few minutes later, he carried with him not just the faint scent of the twins' lavender-scented blankets, but also a kind of quiet certainty she hadn't seen in him before. He set the candle back on the table and sat beside her again, closer this time. "Fine," he said softly. "Dreaming." She smiled faintly. "They dream a lot. It's one of the few things I've been able to give them that no one could take away." Ethan's gaze softened. "We'll give them more than dreams, Sofia. We'll give them a life where they don't have to be afraid." Her chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was hope. The storm outside began to ease, the thunder growing more distant, the rain gentler against the windows. Candlelight still danced between them, but now it felt warmer, safer. Ethan leaned back slightly, his arm resting on the back of the couch, his body turned toward her. "Do you realize how much strength it takes to do what you've done these last 5 years?" he asked. She shook her head. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like survival. It's the same thing, he said. She looked at him, her lips parting as if to respond, but no words came. Instead, she let the truth of his statement settle inside her. For the first time in years, she felt the ground under her feet wasn't shifting. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he could finally stop chasing ghosts. They sat like that, neither moving to break the fragile peace between them, until the candles burned low and the last rumbles of thunder faded into the night. The airport was the same, yet everything about it felt different. A year ago, Ethan had stood in this terminal with his chest tight, watching Sofia vanish into the crowd with two children whose eyes mirrored his own. Back then, the air had been thick with suspicion, unresolved pain, and unspoken truths. Today, that same space was filled with light, laughter, and a rare kind of calm. The calm that only comes when the storm has already passed. The departure boards flashed above them, the tinny announcements echoing through the cavernous space, but none of it seemed to rush them. For once, there was no race against time, no desperate chase through gates and terminals. The four of them walked at their own pace, their steps in quiet harmony. The twins, Daniel and Lila, were a tangle of boundless energy, tugging on their small, rolling suitcases, darting a few steps ahead, then circling back. Every so often, they stopped to point out something only children could marvel at: a shiny vending machine, a man with a guitar, a service dog padding between travelers. Ethan watched them with a softness in his gaze that would have startled anyone who knew the man he used to be. There was no trace of the guarded, steel-spined billionaire who measured every move for advantage. Instead, there was a father who had learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, that presence mattered more than perfection. Sofia walked beside him, her hand slipping naturally into his. It still surprised her sometimes how simple the gesture had become. For years, even standing near him had been a balancing act between longing and restraint, between gratitude and fear. Now, their hands fit together like they had been meant to all along. The silent language of shared nights, whispered promises, and battles fought by side. They were not here for business, nor for a hurried farewell. This was a beginning. Their first family vacation, a week in Santorini, something Ethan had promised the twins when they had started school last fall. Blue skies, white houses, and ice cream twice a day, he had told them, and their faces had lit up as if he'd offered them the moon. But this trip was more than a promise kept. It was a statement, a declaration that they were no longer hiding, no longer fractured. Cameras clicked somewhere in the distance. A cluster of reporters lingered near the cafe, their lenses catching flashes of the four of them together. Ethan didn't flinch. He had once despised the press for their intrusion, for how they twisted lives into headlines. Today, he gave them nothing to twist. His arm around Sofia's waist, the twins darting between them, all of it told a story that couldn't be spun into scandal. By the next morning, the tabloids would run with their chosen narrative, the family that found each other again. It wasn't the kind of headline Ethan had ever courted, but when he caught Sofia's shy smile after noticing the cameras, he realized it was one he could live with. As they passed through security, Daniel clutched Ethan's hand, his small fingers curling tightly around his father's. "Do we get to sit by the window?" he asked, his voice bubbling with anticipation. "You do," Ethan said, crouching down to meet his son's gaze. "And if the clouds look like ice cream, you can tell your sister, but you can't eat them." Lila giggled, her curls bouncing as she leaned against Sofia. "What if they look like dolphins?" "Then we all have to agree it's a sign of good luck," Sofia answered, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. It was such a simple exchange, but to Ethan, it was everything. A year ago, Daniel's hand wouldn't have reached for his. A year ago, Lila's laughter wouldn't have rung so freely in his presence. They had been strangers bound by blood, unsure if they could trust him. Now, they were his whole world. As they approached the gate, an older woman in a navy coat stepped forward, holding a boarding pass. "Mr. Cross," she said, smiling warmly, "your seats are ready, and I just wanted to say, it's nice to see you like this, with them." Ethan blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in her tone. "Thank you," he replied, and for once, the words didn't feel like a polite reflex. They felt earned. They settled into the VIP waiting area, the twins sprawled on the floor with coloring books while Ethan and Sofia sat side by side. For a few minutes, they didn't speak, just watched their children bend over their drawings with fierce concentration. Finally, Ethan turned to her. "I've been thinking about what you said that night during the storm," he began. His voice was low, careful, as if speaking too loudly might break the moment. Sofia glanced at him, her eyes questioning. "Which part?" "No more running, no more secrets," he exhaled slowly. "I've kept my end of it, but I realized something. I don't want that promise to just be about survival. I want it to be about living, together, not because we have to, because we choose to." Her lips curved in a small, almost hesitant smile. "You mean, even when the twins are grown and we're not chasing after lost shoes and forgotten backpacks?" "Especially then," he said, his hand covering hers. Sofia looked down at their joined hands, the warmth of his palm steady and sure. "It took me a long time to believe we could get here," she admitted. "I used to think, if I just kept moving, maybe I could outrun the past. But the truth is, it's the past that caught up to me, and made us face it." He nodded, his gaze steady. "And now, we're not looking over our shoulders anymore." She squeezed his fingers gently, the quiet agreement between them stronger than any spoken vow. The twins returned to the table, proudly holding up their latest artwork, two stick figures holding hands beside a pair of smiling children, all beneath a bright yellow sun. Lila pointed to the tallest figure. "That's you, Daddy," she announced. Daniel added, "And that's Mommy, and that's us. I made sure we're all together." Ethan's throat tightened, the simple picture hitting harder than any grand gesture. He pulled them both into his arms, Sofia leaning in to complete the circle. For a long moment, they stayed like that, the noise of the airport fading into the background, as if time had agreed to pause just for them. When the boarding announcement came, the twins scrambled to gather their things, their excitement spilling into every movement. Ethan and Sofia followed at a slower pace, their eyes meeting in a look that carried both gratitude and a quiet sense of triumph. They had made it here, together. The line to board was already moving when they reached the gate. Daniel and Lila tugged at Sofia's hands, urging her forward, while Ethan lingered behind for a moment, scanning the space as if committing it to memory. Airports had once been a blur for him, another place to pass through on his way to somewhere more important. Now, with the three of them beside him, the space felt like part of the journey, not just the backdrop. As they stepped into the jet bridge, the cool rush of conditioned air wrapped around them. Lila's small voice piped up. "Does the plane go above the clouds, Daddy?" "Way above," Ethan answered, smiling down at her. "You'll see the sun, even if it's raining here." Sofia glanced at him, a warmth in her eyes that went beyond the words. She remembered the man who had once been too busy to answer small questions, who lived in a world where efficiency mattered more than wonder. Seeing him kneel to speak to their children with patience and delight was a quiet victory she hadn't dared hope for a year ago. Their seats were in the front row of the first-class cabin. The twins clambered into their places with the kind of restless excitement that made the flight attendants smile indulgently. Daniel pressed his forehead to the window, already scanning the tarmac for any sign of movement. Lila, meanwhile, announced that she would be keeping the snacks list and began scribbling imaginary menus in the corner of her coloring book. Once they were settled, Sofia took a moment to look at Ethan. The warm light from the overhead panel softened the lines of his face, but his eyes, steady, focused, were the same ones that had once unsettled her with their intensity. Only now, that intensity was turned towards something else entirely. "You're different," she said quietly, almost to herself. He turned toward her. "Different how?" Here. Fully here. Before, even when you were in the room, you weren't." She paused, fingers brushing against the armrest. "I think I used to wonder if you even saw me." Rose and I watched as Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "I see you now, and I don't plan to stop." The sincerity in his tone tightened something in her chest. She didn't answer right away, but when she reached over to adjust the blanket on Lila's lap, her hand lingered on his for just a moment longer than necessary. The engines roared to life, and the cabin began to vibrate with the slow taxi toward the runway. The twins exchanged a glance, that wide-eyed mixture of anticipation and disbelief, and clasped hands across the armrest between them. Ethan watched them and then looked back at Sofia. And in that moment, he thought of every near miss, every conversation they could have had years earlier, but somehow, against the odds, they had arrived here anyway. As the plane lifted from the ground, the city lights fell away beneath them, replaced by an expanse of dark sky streaked with the last traces of sunset. Lila let out a delighted gasp. "We're flying!" she said, smiling. "We are." It wasn't just about the plane. An hour into the flight, when the cabin had settled into a hush, Ethan leaned closer to Sofia. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said, his voice low enough not to disturb the twins, who were absorbed in a movie. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Should I be worried?" He shook his head. "Not worried, just surprised. I set up a foundation last month, in Daniel and Lila's names." Sofia blinked. "You what?" "To support single mothers, housing, education, childcare. I thought about what you went through, how you had to do everything alone. I can't change that, but maybe I can make sure someone else doesn't have to choose between safety and survival." Her breath caught. "Ethan," he reached for her hand. "I wanted you to hear it from me, not from the papers. It's not about the headlines, it's about us. About doing something that matters." She was silent for a long moment, her fingers tightening around his. Then, softly, "You don't know how much that means. Not just for me, for them, for the people you'll help." The seatbelt sign flicked on as the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, but the moment between them stayed steady, unshaken. Hours later, as the first blush of dawn broke through the cabin windows, Sofia woke to find Daniel curled against Ethan's side, his small frame rising and falling with deep, even breaths. Lila was tucked under her own arm, dreaming with a faint smile on her lips. Ethan's gaze met hers over their children's sleeping forms. There was no need for words. Everything that mattered was already understood. When the plane touched down in Santorini, the cabin filled with the rustle of seatbelts unfastening and bags being retrieved. The twins pressed their faces to the windows again, pointing at the shock of blue sky and whitewashed rooftops below. Outside, the air was warm, scented faintly with the sea. Reporters might still follow them here, and cameras might still flash, but it didn't matter. This was their trip, their time. As they walked toward the terminal, Daniel and Lila ran ahead, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Ethan and Sofia followed at a slower pace, their fingers intertwined. "More running," he murmured. "More secrets," she replied. They stepped into the sunlight together, the path ahead open and theirs to choose. Love, marriage, and children are three of the most beautiful threads that can weave the fabric of a life. They are not always perfect, they are not always easy, but when they are nurtured with sincerity, patience, and kindness, they become the foundation for a life filled with meaning and joy. Love is where it begins. It is not simply a feeling that comes and goes, it is a choice that is renewed every day. True love is not about finding someone who completes you, but about walking alongside someone who inspires you to grow, to dream bigger, and to be your best self. Love is in the little gestures, the smile across the room, the hand held during hard times, the willingness to listen when the world feels. It is patient when life is complicated, and it is generous even when we feel tired. Real love thrives on trust, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. Marriage takes that love and gives it a home. It is a commitment not only to share joy, but to weather storms together. It is standing side by side when things are easy, and especially when they are not. Marriage is the daily act of choosing your partner again and again, even when the excitement of new love has been replaced by the comfort of deep familiarity. It is in the teamwork of building a life together, paying bills, raising children, cooking meals, celebrating victories, and supporting each other's dreams. It is the art of balancing two individuals' lives while growing into something greater than the sum of both. Children, when they come into that marriage, do not simply add to it, they transform it. They bring a new kind of love, one that is unconditional, protective, and pure. They challenge parents to see the world through fresh eyes, to be more patient, to find joy in the simplest things. A child's laughter can turn an ordinary day into a cherished memory. Their presence invites parents to think beyond themselves, to make choices with the future in mind, and to pass down values that will shape the next generation. Parenthood is not without its challenges. There are sleepless nights, worries about the future, and moments of self-doubt. But there are also first steps, bedtime stories, shared meals, and milestones that fill the heart with pride. Children teach parents as much as parents teach them about resilience, forgiveness, and the boundless capacity of love. Back to the heart of it all is connection. Love, marriage, and children are bound together by the relationships we build and nurture. Communication is key, not just talking but truly listening. Understanding each other's needs, expressing gratitude, and resolving conflicts with respect keep love strong and marriage healthy. In raising children, communication means guiding them with empathy, giving them the confidence to explore the world while knowing they always have a safe place to return to. A positive view of love, marriage, and children is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing the beauty that exists even in imperfection. It's about seeing the lessons in the struggles and the blessings in the small moments. It's about understanding that love deepens with time, that marriage becomes stronger through shared challenges, and that children grow best when they are surrounded by affection, stability, and support. To build such a life requires effort, yes, but also joy in the journey. It means celebrating each other's strengths, lifting each other during weaknesses, and creating traditions that bind the family together. It means laughing often, forgiving quickly, and never taking each other for granted. When love is the foundation, marriage the structure, and children the heart of the home, life becomes a story worth telling, one filled with compassion, resilience, and hope. These bonds remind us why we work so hard, why we dream so big, and why we hold on during hard times. They are the source of the most profound happiness a person can experience, a happiness that comes from knowing you are loved, you belong, and you are part of something greater than yourself. In the end, love, marriage, and children are not just milestones in life. They are the daily practice of building a life of meaning. They teach us that the greatest riches we can ever have are not in our bank accounts, but in the hearts of the people we love. And when we cherish those connections, we find that we have, in fact, everything we could ever need. Life changes in ways we can never fully imagine the moment we become parents. Before children, the world feels centered on our own ambitions, our own routines, and our own dreams. But once a child enters our life, everything shifts. Suddenly, every choice, every plan, and every heartbeat is tied to someone else. Someone so small, yet so incredibly important. And it is in that shift that life finds some of its deepest meaning. Children have a way of grounding us in what truly matters. They remind us that our value is not measured only by our accomplishments or possessions, but by the love, safety, and guidance we can give them. They become both our inspiration and our anchor. When life feels uncertain, they remind us why we keep going. When the world feels harsh, their laughter is proof that joy still exists. Their presence gives us a reason to wake up in the morning, determined to try again, no matter how difficult yesterday was. Being a parent is not without its challenges. There are sleepless nights, constant worries, and moments of exhaustion that test our limits. Yet in the midst of these trials, children offer something no one else can: unconditional love. They don't care about our titles, our salaries, or our social standing. To them, we are simply mom or dad, the person they trust more than anyone else in the world. That kind of love is pure and irreplaceable, and it becomes the strongest support we can ever have. Over time, children become our greatest teachers. They show us patience when we are tempted to rush, compassion when we are quick to judge, and resilience when we feel ready to give up. They encourage us to be better versions of ourselves, not because they demand it, but because we want to be worthy of their admiration. Every milestone they achieve, their first words, first steps, first day of in moments of weakness, children have an incredible way of giving us strength. A simple hug from them can soften the heaviest burdens, a smile can dissolve the day's stress. They remind us that even if we are struggling, we are still someone's hero, and that realization fuels our perseverance like nothing else can. Life with children also deepens our understanding of legacy. We start to think not just about what we leave behind materially, but what values, lessons, and memories we pass on. We want to raise them to be kind, courageous, and strong, not just for their own sake, but because we know they will shape the future long after we are gone. Knowing that they carry a part of us forward gives our lives a purpose that reaches beyond our own lifetime. There is also a unique comfort in the bond between parent and child. Even as they grow and become independent, they remain a source of emotional refuge. They become people we can share our deepest thoughts with, people who will remember our stories, and people who, in their own way, will care for us when we need it most. This reciprocity of love, giving to them in their early years and receiving their support later in life, creates one of the most profound relationships a human being can experience. Having children doesn't just add to life, it transforms it. They teach us to appreciate small, ordinary moments, a shared meal, a walk in the park, a bedtime story, because we know these moments will one day be memories we hold on to dearly. They bring laughter into spaces that might otherwise be filled with silence. They remind us that even in a complicated and unpredictable world, there is still innocence worth protecting and love worth fighting for. In the end, children are not just our dependents. They are our companions in life's journey. They grow alongside us, shaping our days and our hearts. They give us a reason to push through our hardest challenges and celebrate our smallest victories. And when we look back, we often realize that the happiest, most meaningful parts of our life are not the grand achievements or the moments of personal glory. They are the moments spent holding our children's hands, listening to their laughter, and knowing that no matter what, we have been loved deeply and truly. So yes, life becomes more meaningful when we have children. They are not just part of our story, they become the very heart of it. They are the strongest support we will ever know, the purest love we will ever feel, and the greatest legacy we will ever leave behind.